Last year, the Commanders proved everyone, including myself, wrong. I ranked this team at number 31 in the preseason power rankings last year, and I was completely wrong. They went ahead and made it to the NFC Championship, knocked on the door of the Super Bowl. Here I am again, lower on the team than most. A lot of people thought that they were going to be in that bottom 5 area of the league last year. That included me. Now everyone is really switching up on this team. Dan Quinn did a great job. The direction of the franchise completely changed. And for most people, this is a very clear top 10 team in the NFL. For me, I still think they're very good, but I don't quite have them there. But it cannot be understated. This is still a very good football team. Like I said, Dan Quinn completely changed the direction of this franchise, of this team. But it wasn't just Dan Quinn. They also have an elite, top-notch quarterback, a quarterback I've been a big fan of for a very long time. I thought that he was better than Caleb Williams as a prospect. And so far, that couldn't be any more true. He's a truly great passer. He throws the ball ridiculously well, and his mobility is straight up game-breaking. But the offense was simplified for him. It was a more college-esque offense with simpler route concepts. Now, how will they adjust? There's a full year of film on this offense, on Jayden Daniels at an NFL level. Now, how are defensive coordinators going to adjust? And they will. And how will that affect his game? And how will Cliff Kingsbury adjust to those defensive adjustments that these teams are making? That's a big question. Do I think this offense is going to completely fall off a cliff? No. But I think they are going to have to change how they operate. It's fine to be a simple offense, and I expect them to remain a relatively simple, spread, air raid team. But in order to get away with that style, you have to have immense talent. You look at Philly. They run a simpler type of offense under Nick Sirianni. All these RPOs, single read concepts, and just the go balls down the sideline. But when you have A.J. Brown, when you have Jalen Hurts, you're able to get away with that. The Commanders are kind of in a similar boat. They probably will run a simpler offense because their talent is just that good. They don't need to have some elaborate scheme, an elaborate play on the board. They just need to simply execute better than the other guys, and they have guys that are good enough to do that. You look at these pass catchers, right? Terry McLaurin, he'll go up and grab anything while being a great, great separator. Noah Brown may not be able to separate as well, but he's another guy that can go up and grab any jump ball. And Deebo Samuel is the most unique receiver I've ever seen. A great after-catch player who can run through any secondary in the NFL. Then Zach Ertz, we all know how well he settles versus zone. Overall, it's a very well-rounded receiver core that will be able to win their matchups, which is what this offense is all about. Last year, with Brian Robinson and Jayden Daniels, they were a good rushing attack. Now, I want to see that take a step up. Because some of Cliff Kingsbury's designs were really interesting. Some of the ways of getting his linemen out in space were very unique. I'm curious how much more of that he has in his bag and how much they're going to lean on that as this offense finds itself needing to add a little bit more flavor to their attack. I also think the offensive line went from a weaker one. It definitely wasn't weak, but it wasn't in that top notch, right? It overperformed. A lot of people thought Brandon Coleman starting at left tackle, that was not going to work well. It worked fine. Now, though, it should be a really good unit. Laramie Tunsil is a piece that completely changes this entire O-line because now they're moving Brandon Coleman, who, like I said, severely overperformed. They're going to move him to guard. And now there's no real weak spot, but there's still great linemen like Sam Cosmi and like Laramie Tunsil that'll really push this offense over the edge. Defensively, Dan Quinn did a great job getting these guys to, once again, overperform. I have to give Dan Quinn credit because not only did the offense overperform, the defense did. They had a lot of guys that I didn't think could play starting caliber NFL football, and I was completely wrong. Completely wrong. Guys like Dante Fowler went ahead and really established themselves as truly great players for this team. But Dante Fowler was a big offseason loss for them, and they lost other guys. They made improvements in some areas, but then in other areas, they got worse. It feels like it was one step forward, one step back throughout the entire offseason on the defensive side of the ball. Because, yeah, they added Trey Amos, which in that corner room, they needed to add some more talent there. Trey Amos currently isn't listed as a starter on Ourlads or ESPN depth chart, but he probably will take over that CB2 spot instead of Jonathan Jones maybe even establish himself as the cornerback one. But now Jeremy Chinn's gone, so that safety room is weaker. They added Javon Kinlaw on the defensive line, but they lost Jonathan Allen. I talked about Dante Fowler. That's a big loss too. The defensive line should still be fine, right? I like it, but it doesn't have a great pass rush here. Dorrance Armstrong, I like. He should be a good player. Deron Payne is still a very good player, but it's not a great pass rush. I talked about that secondary earlier. There's some question marks there. What is Marshawn Lattimore in this point in his career? It's just really difficult to judge what this defense will be, but I do know this. That linebacker duo of Bobby Wagner, who's still a very smart player that fits the run very well, and Frankie Louvu, an underrated star who has the athleticism to play a multitude of roles from coverage to pass rushing. Defense probably should be fine. Do I think it will be great, game-changing? No. But I do think there's enough here behind a defensive-minded head coach in Dan Quinn for this defense to be fine. But we're now getting to that point where fine isn't quite good enough. That's why they're number 12 here. I think the offense is going to take a step back, and I think the defense will just be average. How much does that really translate to success in an NFC East that has a team like Philadelphia? Let's look at the schedule and find out. Yeah, it's rough. It's rough. I feel very bad because the Commanders I have ranked 12th. 14 teams make the playoffs, 7 in the NFC, 7 in the AFC. So, you would think the Commanders would be a playoff team. But the NFC East has a very tough schedule. And out of those 14 teams in the top 14, a lot more of them are in the NFC than the AFC. So, yeah, I have the Commanders finishing 9th in the NFC. I feel really bad because the Commanders should make the playoffs. Like I said, they are a top 14 team in the NFL. But we go through the schedule, and yeah, okay. The Giants, that's a win. We feel good about that. But then the Packers are a very tough team. I really like Green Bay and what they're doing. Green Bay is the home team here. It's tough. This game is kind of up in the air. It kind of is. And that one win would go a long way, but Green Bay also needs that one win. A lot. So, you're really splitting hairs here. Green Bay being the home team really gives them a big advantage. I think, like I said, Washington is going to see that a lot of teams adjust to what they're doing offensively. I still think that they're going to beat a simplistic defense like the Raiders because they're more talented. I think they're going to beat another defense that isn't overly talented in the Falcons. I think they're going to be able to even beat the Chargers, who have a much more complex defensive unit, but I think Washington's personnel is good enough. But Chicago off a bye? Yeah, that's a scary team. That is a legitimate threat. Chicago's going to be able to do a lot of stuff. They have a lot of talent off of a bye where they're able to really put their scheme together and really make sure the scheme is good to beat Jaden Daniels and alter the scheme so they can beat Jaden Daniels in that offense. I feel very confident about Chicago winning that. The Cowboys, yeah, this is an upset, but the Cowboys are the home team here. The Cowboys are going to run the football, or at least attempt to, behind that offensive line. And here's the big thing. Here's what this comes down to. Dallas's run defense is terrible. But if you're not going to try and run the football and you're going to be operating in this air raid style, you don't really take advantage of the Cowboys' weaknesses that make them such a bad team this year, right? When I say that Dallas is a bad team, that's really if you're playing against Dallas the right way. I think Cliff Kingsbury and Washington are going to be stubborn here. But if they choose to play smart, and if they choose to embrace the running game and go against their identity here, they should absolutely win this one. But I think this is going to be a situation where Cliff Kingsbury is going to be a little bit too stubborn, and he's going to play directly into how the Cowboys want you to play. They want you to throw the football a lot. Washington will probably be stubborn and do that because that's kind of just how they are as a team. I'm picking the Cowboys to win this one at home. Then the Chiefs, we know what the Chiefs are. I mean, maybe we could see Washington win this one. I could see like a Jaden Daniels miraculous drive towards the end to win it for them. But Steve Spagnuolo is going to dial up some great plays late in the game if that situation comes up. And I think those plays are going to be perfect to beat a Washington offense that needs to really adjust. Now, I hope that they start to adjust around this period of the year because, like I said, it's a simplistic unit. The Seahawks know how to do a lot of different stuff on the defensive side of the ball. They want to try and confuse you, but how much does that really matter against Washington? Washington is going to cut the field in half. If they are cutting the field in half, then all of a sudden they don't need to read the full field. If you're doing these full field disguise coverages, it won't really matter if the quarterback is just reading one specific area. And I think that leaves them a little bit vulnerable to get beat by this team. I also just think Washington will start to evolve and adjust to beat these teams like Detroit. I think their personnel is going to be good enough to score, but I also think Detroit's going to be able to score a decent amount against them. So this is a tough one, but I'm giving it to Washington at home. I think they get upset by the Dolphins, though. Just simply, I think Washington kind of gets caught off guard a little bit here as the bye week is coming up. Then off of the bye, they're playing Sean Payton off a bye. Sean Payton is a damn good coach off a bye week. They're going to send a lot of pressure, and they have the corners that could go man-on-man with Terry McLaurin. You know, they have the personnel to go ahead and stop these guys on Washington and make it so Jaden Daniels has to make some miraculous play. And while he's going to be able to do that decent amount, I think the Broncos are going to be able to just simply score more, right? So I have the Broncos winning that one. I think the Vikings are going to do a lot of elaborate stuff. Then I think Washington will really get their stuff together. Even beating the Eagles, I think they're going to adjust their game plan to beat the Cowboys for this later game. But then I think Philly's going to win that last week, and yeah, that's a 9-8 season right there. Now, I think they're a good team. If I were to say the games are up in the air, definitely week 2. Week 6, I feel really good about them winning that. Maybe Washington will adjust their game plan for week 7. Maybe they don't get upset by the Dolphins. So I can give them 3 more wins, but I feel pretty good about a 9-8 record right here, missing the playoffs. The Commanders are still a very good team, but I think they just got figured out a little bit too much for them to overcome it. That's all for this episode. I hope you all enjoyed.